Let's bring in managing editor for the Daily Signal, Tyler O'Neill. Tyler, the media heads exploding, and we're not going to call them mainstream media anymore because we feel like it's the message of independent media like Real America's Voice that actually helped the voters decide to do something actually independent this time. So we're just going to call them the regime media or the legacy media or the wacko media, whatever you want to call them. But nonetheless, heads all exploding, Tyler.
Yeah, I think it is very illustrative that heads are exploding in the legacy media. I love the term regime media for it.
I do too.
Because what these people are responding to is the fact that their power is going to be challenged. I love the idea, everybody acts as though the Department of Justice has not been weaponized against conservatives, has not been employed against, radical traditional Catholics. We saw the FBI citing the Southern Poverty Law Center and going after Americans because of their faith. So I think Matt Gaetz is going to clean house at the Department of Justice. And I think Trump made this appointment in order to send a message to say, like, look, I am not afraid. And by the way, Matt Gaetz has been one of the stalwart fighters against corruption in the federal government. Now, it remains to be seen whether he's going to make it through. I mean, Trump has discussed doing recess appointments. It's going to be a very interesting next few months as these nominees are considered. But I think that Matt Gaetz is really a lightning rod for this transition, and he's drawing a lot of attention. You get the legacy media losing their minds over this. And I think that really shows you that they're scared, that they know that somebody like Matt Gaetz is going to reveal what the Department of Justice, how it's been weaponized against conservatives. They won't be able to hide anymore. We're going to have Twitter Files 2.0 at a very high level because all of this corruption is going to be exposed. And that's what the American people want. That's why they sent President Trump back to the Oval Office.
Yeah, it's all going to be exposed, Tyler, for sure. And of course, the deep state and those that have been entrenched in Washington for a very long time are going to try to expose all of the Trump inner workings as well. And you can be sure the Washington Post and the New York Times and others are going to pick up on it. But if they do that, it's just going to embolden the MAGA movement even more. So I'm not quite sure that they will win that. There's no doubt about that. Hey, another President Trump cabinet pick is sending shockwaves. There's quite a few, Pete Hegseth. But what about Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence? That's the post she's up for, as you know. What do you think? I mean, what's your reasoning behind this specifically? Because once again, a lot of people just say, oh, it's loyalty, and that's part of it. But that's not really the main reason. What's the main reason?
Well, I think your Chiron says it perfectly. She's a fearless truth teller. And by the way, I think we're starting to see a trend where many of Trump's picks to head these government agencies have been themselves unjustly attacked by those government agencies in the past. And we saw Matt Gaetz under investigation by the Department of Justice. We saw Tulsi Gabbard placed on a watch list, essentially a terror watch list, by the intelligence community. So Tulsi Gabbard is really going to clean house at the intelligence community. And I think it's very important to notice Tulsi's not been afraid to talk about the corruption at the intelligence community, and she's not been afraid to go against many of the left's sacred cows that have been the subject of the censorship industrial complex. Very few people have been as outspoken against the censorship industrial complex as Tulsi Gabbard. And to see her have an opportunity to take the reins at the intelligence community, at some of the places that are the tip of the spear of the censorship industrial complex, it is really inspiring to see. I do have to say, while I'm here, I have a book coming out in January called The Woktopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government. And I try to get at some of this massive left-wing influence campaign that is driving woke ideology into the federal government. And I think many of these staffers, many of this new administration could take a look at that book and see just how infiltrated everything is. And I think many of them already know, and I have great confidence that they're going to really clean house. But that book hopefully will help them find the right people to target.
Well, to the point, to the title of your book and part of what we've been talking about here over the last several minutes, the tentacles of the woke-topus are also touching the mainstream media. Let's just be honest about that. So in that context, let's look at the fact that Republicans are now going to have or do have control of both the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Do you think that's going to force the media to some degree to come back towards the middle, to come back towards its traditional values?
Yeah, I think... So we've seen a little bit of a come to Jesus moment. Not the fact that President Trump not only won the Electoral College, but also won the popular vote has really kind of shocked the left. I think one of the reasons we haven't seen the same sort of outrage, the same sort of protests on the street that we saw when Trump won in 2016 is because they realized that this is not an aberration, that Trump's win in this case represents the victory of a movement that has been growing over years. And so I think the legacy media is struggling with that. At some point, they're going to, I mean, do I think they're going to really reform themselves? No, I'm kind of pessimistic about that. But I do think that this bigger win is, at least for a second, going to lead to some introspection. But at the end of the day, Trump's victory shows, like you said, the strength of alternative media like Real America's Voice, like the Daily Signal, like the Daily Wire. We're starting to see the explosion of an alternative media landscape in this country. And that is really healthy for our democracy, for our information ecosystem. And it's really healthy for the ability to challenge these sacred cows that the woke-topus focuses on. And that's one of the great things about many of these administration picks, is that they're really going to shake up Washington. And I think President Trump, the Republican House, the Republican Senate, they're going to take on these issues head on, and that's going to require the legacy media to take a little bit of a step back. I mean, they're still going to find their bias. I find it really interesting. There was a back and forth. President Obama was considering naming Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to the EPA back in, this must have been 2008. And Politico said, Obama looking at stars. And then when Trump names Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it's suddenly, the very controversial picks of the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So you can see the media bias, and I don't think it's ever going away, but I do think the challenges are increasing, and conservative media is only going to continue to grow.
What do you think of the regime media's assertion that the Matt Gaetz nomination is just some sort of distractive, red herring, so that the media will all hone in on Matt Gaetz and let everyone else slide right through?
President-elect Trump is a brilliant man. And so I think there are two possibilities here. I think it's very likely that Matt Gaetz is his legitimate pick for the Department of Justice. That's what he said. That's where he puts his money where his mouth is. Trump has made this appointment, and Matt Gaetz immediately resigned from the House. That said, if Trump, in his spidey senses, knows that the way to distract from some of the other appointments is to bring Matt Gaetz in like this, and he has some sort of agreement with Matt Gaetz, I think most likely Matt Gaetz is the pick, but every transition goes in a certain direction where you win some, you lose some. So Matt Gaetz may end up acting attorney general. He may get recess appointed. I think Trump is not afraid to do that sort of thing, even with a Republican Senate. But at the same time, if Matt Gaetz is sort of a red herring, that would also be a brilliant move, because many of these other people who are better qualified in some cases, like Pete Hegseth, is also a veteran. Pete Hegseth led Veterans organizations, everybody acted as though Pete Hegseth was this completely unpalatable choice. And then Trump comes out with Matt Gaetz, and suddenly all the attention is on Matt Gaetz. And Pete Hegseth, who, by the way, is a man's man, who, if anybody should be trusted to bring more of the, increase. We've been seeing the military struggling with a recruitment crisis recently.
Right.
And I think somebody like Pete Hegseth at the helm at the Department of Defense would send a tremendous message to the young men of America that America is back. And we have a muscular man's man at the helm. And you should sign up. And, because not only is Trump focused on peace, not going to waste your life in a pointless war, but is going to use strength to achieve peace.
Yes, and no more DEI, Tyler, which is also going to be an amazing thing to watch. Tyler O'Neill, managing editor for Daily Signal, new book coming out. We're excited to see it. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me.